Good evening, friends. It is night 25 in the Elul Screen Challenge, journeying our way to Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, reading passages from Avodat Hashem Inner Work, the teachings of Rav Ashlag. Page 43. At first, we work spiritually only when it benefits our self-interest. As we progress spiritually, we come to understand that spiritual work is working to go beyond self-interest. Then the true spiritual work begins. Beautiful. At first, we work spiritually only when it benefits our self-interest, right? So any beginning of spiritual work is all for self-interest. Even if it appears to be altruistic, even if it appears to be for others, it is indeed for ourselves. Even if it's positive, like I want to stop focusing on things that don't have meaning, and I want to have more meaning in my life. That's a beautiful goal. It's still self-interest. Or I am tired of suffering. I want to be free of suffering, right? So the Buddhist path is all about transcending suffering, or going beyond suffering, ending suffering, right? Even that is self-interest, right? I suffer, I would like to stop suffering. Or as I was speaking about pleasure, I see that I get pleasure through physical things, or intellectual, or through my role in the world, through accolades, through emotional gratification, whatever it may be. And I want to find and actualize a spiritual pleasure that is beyond measure. That also self-interest. A great goal, a great aspiration. I wish we all had these aspirations, but still self-interest. So at first, we work spiritually only when it benefits our self-interest. Yet, as we progress spiritually, we come to understand that spiritual work is actually working to go beyond self-interest, right? And that's the same with the Buddhist or an Eastern path, right? Where we realize that our ego is a limitation, is a limiting factor, and we do sadhana, we do spiritual practice in order to transcend our ego, in order to go beyond our self-interest, to get to a place that is beyond the I as we know it, into a place of union, into a place of liberation. So all spiritual paths are similar in this regard. And in this path, it is that coming to a place of union with the divine, and thus becoming a giver and a divine servant, working to manifest the divine will of healing and transformation and awakening for the entire planet, for all of humanity. So the Rav says, when we come to understand that spiritual work is working to go beyond our self-interest, we get to that place in our spiritual path, that's when the true spiritual work begins, right? It's almost like all the other work is an intro, is a preamble to the true spiritual work. Once we understand truly, I think not just conceptually, but actually in our being, that the spiritual work is going beyond our self-interest. The test. Are we willing to work spiritually when we do not feel the spirituality? Are we willing to make a lot of effort in this state? If so, it is a sign of our being in divine service. If we want to work spiritually only when we have a spiritual feeling and there is a spiritual atmosphere, quote unquote atmosphere, it is a sign that we are only serving ourselves. So we talked about the same concept and with different words earlier on. But the Rav is saying this is the test. The test. Are we really, truly willing to work on spirituality, to work spiritually, when we do not feel the spirituality, right? When we don't, or not in a state of bliss, when we're not in a state of connection, or in the Rav's words, when we're not in a state of revelation, when we're not feeling God, right? We're feeling blah, we're feeling gross, we're feeling bad about ourselves, we're feeling down, we're feeling really down in the world of finite reality, of suffering. Are we then at that point willing to work spiritually? Are we willing to make a lot of effort in that place when we don't feel God, when we don't feel light, when we don't feel the bliss of spiritual connection? If so, if we are willing to work hard, then that is a sign of our being in divine service. That's actually when we're in divine service. Not when we feel the light and it's easy. When God is revealed and it's easy to serve God. It's easy to be kind and loving to others. It's easy to be a giver. It's easy to move through the world in a state of love and connection. When it is that, when it is easy, that's when we are connected, that's when it's easy. But when we're not feeling connected, when we're not in those states, we're not feeling tapped in, that's when it really counts. And that is, again, the state of emunah, of embodied faith, that you have to work for, that you have to really work. That's when the real spiritual weightlifting comes in. Not when things are easy, but actually when things are hard, when we don't feel connected. And that's the real test. That's the true test. And I'm not great at it. I will be completely honest. But I know that that's really when the real work is when we're not feeling it. We're not feeling God, and we still show up to our practice, which is also why a practice is so important, because that's when we're tested. We don't have a practice if we don't have, like in the Jewish tradition, the mitzvot, the commandments, the Jewish practices, then there's no test. Then we're spiritual when we feel spiritual, and we're not when we don't feel spiritual. But if you have a path and a practice that you're committed to daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, etc., then that's when it's tested. It's tested because, it's the sun is setting and you're now meant to say the evening prayer and you're not feeling it, but you do it anyway and you push through and you praise God and you speak to God. That's when real emunah comes through. But not if it's, again, not if it's mechanical and it's just like the alarm goes off and like you're praying and you're doing your praying because, oh, it's evening prayer time, right? No, it's like real prayer, deep prayer, even when you're not feeling it, and you call out and you even say, I'm not feeling it. Please, Spirit, let me feel you, let me see you, let me know you. That's when the real work takes place. right? If we want to work spiritually only when we have a spiritual feeling, or when there is a spiritual atmosphere, a spiritual energy around us, this is then a sign that we are only serving ourselves. Then it's just self-serving. I was just talking to a client about this and about how that's really when the challenge and the real work comes in, and that's why it's so hard. And that's why we don't find a lot of people who are really committed to doing the work. Because to actually do it takes a tremendous amount of effort and a tremendous amount of commitment and devotion and willpower. Negativity has no power other than the power we give it. Negativity has no power of its own. Negativity has no power other than the power we give it. Negativity has no power of its own. So that's interesting. Negativity has no power. Right? Well, I think that negativity is a human construct. It's a human construct. So that human construct, we're the ones giving it power. It has no power of its own. It only is a human construct, and thus we are giving it power. That's one way you could understand it. Or that negativity doesn't really exist. That negativity only has power when we give it power, meaning when we choose to create that vibration in the world. Like when we're living in the world and we're moving through the world and we choose to bring that vibration in. But what about other people's negativity? Again, it only has power when we give it power, if we feed into it, right? And it's so much what's going on in the world right now. There's so much negativity. And so many people are feeding into it and fueling it and attacking it and thus giving it power and power and power. That's like what's happening in the world right now in all these political environments and all over the place. But when we see negativity, we feed it by like highlighting it and then attacking it and saying, that's so negative, that is evil. Like, so when we're doing that, we're actually feeding the negativity. We're feeding hatred and anger in our own bodies and our own selves, and we're projecting it back towards the negativity that we're picking up on, rather than looking at it through a different lens, which might be something like, that negativity that's coming from that person, where is it really coming from? What's underneath that? What do they really long for? What do they really desire? What is fueling that negativity? Their own suffering, their own longing for peace and safety in the world, right? They're a human animal that wants safety, and the negativity is coming from that place and being spewed out unconsciously or consciously. They want to belong to a group, right? Whatever it is, then we're looking underneath and we're seeing really the source of that. and then like go further down, and the source is to be connected, and the source is to be connected to God, to their true identity, to true love, to true union and unity. And thus we don't feed the negativity. Actually, we feed what's underneath it, which is they want love. They want to be connected, even if they don't know it. But really down in the root of their being and their soul, that's what they want. That's what they're longing for. And this is how it's manifesting. It's manifesting as negativity. Let me know if you agree with that. If you think that's baloney, whatever. Let me know what you think. If we do not have questions, it is a sign that we are not working spiritually. A person who is working spiritually always has questions and is always in need of answers. Okay, pretty straightforward. If we do not have questions, it is a sign we are not working spiritually. So if you're working hard, if you're truly making strides and effort, you're going to have questions. You're going to have questions about how you're doing, and am I doing this properly? Is this really what God wants? Am I doing this from a place of ego? What does it really mean to give? What does it really mean to receive? Like, what is the light of God? What, you're going to have a lot of questions about the path, because you're on it and you're committed and you're working and you're trying to understand and you're trying to do your best and to unite with spirit. So a person who's working spiritually always has questions and is always in need of answers, always trying to get to the truth, always trying to get to a deeper sense of knowing and being and really being, and not being from the head, but being in the heart, from the heart and the full and the true being. So there's always going to be questions and always going to be a longing for answers. Okay, final passage. Imagine how we would act if we experienced God in a revealed way. How would you speak? How would you think? How would we feel? Imagine how we would act if we experienced God in a revealed way. How would we speak? How would we think? How would we feel? We can train ourselves to be this way even when we do not feel the reality of God. We can train ourselves to be this way even when we do not feel the reality of God. If feeling God's presence would bring us to give up some sleep or money or honor, then we need to work to give up these things to the same extent, even without the feeling. This is the spiritual work called emunah. Great passage. Yeah, how would you act if you felt God, right? If you felt the divine unity, the source of all existence, of it, the entire existence of all the universe, all the galaxies, all the planets. If you felt that and felt connected to that source, you felt the divine light vibrating and shining in all things around you and all people around you, how would you then act? How would you speak? How would you think? How would you feel? The Rav is saying we can train ourselves to speak, think, act, and feel in this way, even when we do not feel the reality of God, right? Like what we were saying before. Even when God isn't revealed and we're not feeling connected, we can train ourselves to be this way. If feeling God's presence would bring us to give up some money or some sleep or some honor, right? If we felt God's presence and feeling God's presence in this way would inspire us to give up some sleep, to get up earlier, to give more money to charity, to give up some of the honor that we covet. Well, then we need to work on giving up those things now to the same extent, even when we're not feeling God's presence. This is the spiritual work of emunah, right? So when you act in a way that you feel you would act if you felt God's presence, even when you don't feel God's presence, that's emunah. That's this embodied faith that we keep referring to, that is referred to throughout this book, every time we meet. Okay, there you have it. Hope you are all well. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.